Okay, welcome to our July 16th meeting of the British Empire Study Group. Everyone's welcome at the British Empire Study Group. If you don't collect stamps, you're still welcome. You just need to have an interest in what we're talking about. And there's no pressure to join us every single month, but of course we would welcome you. So our next program will be on August 13th, and that is with David Beach, one of my favorites. And he's going to tell us about some of the philatelic rarities at the British Library. Now, that title may be familiar, but trust me, the subjects he brings up are totally different. So now I'm just going to play a little bit. Okay, so that's all you get on that. I sent it around. If you're interested in it, you could get more of it. It's free. It was something that was done at 3 a.m, so don't hold it against me. Totally sober, by the way. But anyway, so without and it explains sort of what made me interested in this topic, because we had an incident like this, and someone said, "All right, let's do a seminar on plating penny reds, and who could we find?" And of course, everyone was pointing to one person, and that one person is here with us tonight. So I am going to turn it over to my co-host, Rob Lutens, to introduce tonight's speaker.
Thank you, Joan. Welcome everyone to the July 2026 British Empire Study Group webinar on a topic that's very close to my heart: plating the Great Britain Imperforate penny red stamps with Daniel Matthews. Also, I'm sitting in the Detroit area with smoke all around us, and I imagine that several of you out there in the audience are experiencing it as well. I'm sure that some of you are familiar with the plate number actually being printed on the left and right margins of certain perforated penny red stamps. But how can an imperforate penny red plate number be identified when it doesn't appear on the stamp? In this illustrated 45-minute presentation, Dan Matthews introduces the principles and practical methods used to plate the Great Britain Imperforate penny reds of 1841 to 1854. Beginning with the origins and production of the stamps, he explains how the master die, transfer rollers, printing plates, and individually punched corner letters created the small but repeatable differences that allow collectors to identify specific plates. Daniel then presents a step-by-step plating method based on cancellation and comparison with confirmed examples. A worked example demonstrates the complete process, followed by a selection of useful plating clues, including frame and corner features, distinctive or repaired check letters, guidelines, constant marks, and re-entries. The presentation is intended to provide an accessible introduction for newcomers, while also offering practical observations of interest to more experienced collectors. A little background on our speaker for this evening, Daniel Matthews. Dan is a specialist in Great Britain line engraved stamps, who's spent more than 20 years collecting, studying, plating, and selling imperforate penny reds. He is the author, here I got a picture of it right here. He's the author of Imperforate Penny Reds, a guide to collecting, plating, and valuing the imperforate penny red stamps, which was awarded a silver medal at Europhilex, Birmingham in 2025. His experience includes examining around 30,000 stamps and documenting approximately 10,000 examples. Through his store, Daniel Matthews Stamps, he aims to help collectors identify, understand, and build their collections with confidence. So without further ado, here is our esteemed speaker for this evening, Dan Matthews.
Oh, thank you so much, Rob. What a lovely intro. And thank you to Rob and Joan for giving me the chance to speak today. I could speak about line engraved stamps all day, and I've got an hour, so thank you. Hopefully you'll enjoy it. Um, so I think Rob's already introduced me, so I don't need to say much about myself. But I've collected stamps since I was a boy, and at some point, I kind of moved into selling stamps, and I was told at an early stage, at some point you'll have to decide whether you're going to be a collector or a dealer, and I don't think I ever really made the choice. I think I always have done both. I think probably more a collector than a dealer because I was just saying to Rob and Joan that I continue to spend more on stamps than I do on selling. So I still collect them. I'm trying to collect a full set, but I'd like to share them. So I like to collect them, document them, and then sell them on. Um, I, I'm particularly interested in penny reds, and um, I've wanted, I've always wanted to share that knowledge. I've probably read every book there is on penny reds. There's a good batch of literature, but it's quite hard to get into. And I've always felt like I probably have a strength of in terms of communicating and writing to bring some of that quite opaque information, quite mysterious information, to be a bit more accessible. So the book is an attempt at doing that, and I'm really glad to talk about it today. So really want to try and demystify these beautiful stamps and the process of plating them. So thank you again, Rob. Um, so yeah, so everybody collects stamps differently, and I personally like to just collect huge numbers of stamps and thoroughly document them and then sell them on. Everybody's got a different way, and that's the beauty of it, really. But I've got stock books full of these wonderful stamps. I love the fact that they all look very similar, all look the same, but ultimately every single stamp is different. I find that fascinating. Um, so the stamp we are talking about today is the 1841 Imperforate penny red. Um, it's effectively a penny black printed in red, um, and much cheaper than a penny black. So you can collect them in much greater numbers. Um, they are so I've put a couple of pictures there. So almost always cancelled by a Maltese cross or an 1844 type cancellation. They have the stars in the top corners. They have the check letters in the bottom corners, printed in red, cut out by hand. Crucially, no plate number on the stamp. So when people talk about plating penny reds, I think people think about the later penny reds, the ones with the letters in the top corners, where the plate numbers were written conveniently in the margins, but they're not here. But you can still work it out, and I'm going to try and explain how you can do that. Um, I've already mentioned the book, so I won't go into that. But yeah, you can buy the book if you want it. Um, but yeah, before I get into plating, I wanted to properly explain how the stamps were made and how they came about, because in order to plate them, I think it's important to understand how they were made, because that is crucial to understanding how you actually plate them. I didn't know where to start really, but I've started at the point where we in Britain we moved from a really complex system of postage with different rates for different mileages and cities to a uniform four penny post system in 1839, and then in 1840 moved to a penny post system, and then May 1840 the famous penny black was released. Hugely successful, but within months of it being used, people realised that you could possibly fraudulently reuse it. So people found ways to wash the cancellation ink off, and pretty quickly the authorities started trials to change the colour of the cancellation. So it was found to be better to have black cancellation ink, but then that didn't contrast well with the stamp. So trials were undertaken, and after lots of going around in circles, eventually settled on having a red stamp with black cancellation ink. Um, and that's how we got to the penny red. So 10th of Feb 1841, the Imperforate penny red was released, and gave rise to this huge field of collecting. The printers of the penny red were called Perkins, Bacon and Co. So they were security printers. So stamps were ultimately on the same level as currency, in terms of being how crucial it was that they couldn't be uh, forged. So Perkins, who came from America to Britain, initially to pitch for the contract to print British banknotes. Didn't get that contract, but got the contract to print stamps. And the stamps were produced through a deliberately complex process in such a way that they basically could not be forged unless somebody was willing to spend huge amounts of money on the actual equipment to make them and make billions of stamps, which nobody obviously would do. So nobody managed to ever forge a penny red. They were made in such a complicated way, using the line engraved system, which I'm going to talk through because it will help with understanding how to plate them. It's also an interesting story. So through transfer rollers and steel plates, it meant that a design could be reproduced billions of times in an identical format. That penny red design was in place for decades. It was so successful through changes to the perforations and dyes and watermarks and lettering all changed, but the stamp stayed in that format for, I think it was about 36 years. Um, so the first stamp die. So a die is effectively a piece of metal which was engraved, which the stamps were printed from. So the first stamp die was used effectively to through a process of transferring it, print billions of penny reds, and it's one of the most astonishing artistic and technical achievements in history. So this original die was based on a famously William Wayon's medal of Queen Victoria, which Henry Cobbold did a sketch of, and then Charles and Frederick Heath engraved onto the metal die. So this engraved die was very difficult and complicated to make. The background of it was transferred on from an engine turned plate, which had the sinusoidal waves and background, and then the stars in the top corners and the lettering and the Queen's profile was engraved by hand using magnifying glasses and immense skill over the course of several months. And that image was then transferred. So that die was then hardened. So Perkins described the die as being effectively indestructible, and it was. It was hardened using methods at the time, and it was almost it was used to print billions of penny reds. Incredible achievement. So that was then used to transfer the image to via transfer rollers to plates, which was used to print the penny reds. And I'll talk you through that in a sec. So this was the process of transferring the image from the die to effectively the printed article. And I'll just skim through this because I'll go through it in more detail in a sec. But it started as a die, was a transfer roller was pushed into the die, and that was then pushed onto a plate, and that was then used to print the stamps. And that was what a plate looked like. So it had 240 stamp images on it, ready to be filled with ink and ready for printing. I'm going to mention the corner letters because they are particularly important and particularly useful for plating. So when the die was made, it didn't have corner letters in. They were punched in by hand onto the plate, which meant that every single plate had slightly different corner letters in terms of position and orientation and weight. So tiny differences in the corner letters is one of the main clues that allow us to plate stamps now, along with other clues as well. The corner letters were effectively a security measure, and no one's exactly sure of what the measure was, but my best theory is that if somebody managed to fraudulently produce a stamp, they would have to probably just make one to print, and they'd have to pick a particular set of corner letters. And if a particular set was seen to be used excessively, then people could probably trace that back to the source. But yeah, no one's completely sure about the purpose, but that's what we think. And then the final printing of the stamps involved the metal plate being filled with ink, carefully wiped off, and then pushed using a printing press into dampened paper, pressed down hard, and then the paper effectively had the ink printed onto it, slightly raised off the surface, which is why these stamps are so unique compared to any of the later printings of stamps. So once Perkins lost the contract for printing penny reds, we never went back to line engraved printing. So these really do feel like relics of history. And to me, they feel different from any stamp since. So they have like a real unique tactile feel. And one of the reasons I love them is the feel of them. Um, and then I find it really funny, really, that like 200 years later, like 180 years later, we're now sitting here trying to work out the quirks of this process that happened so long ago. I think what I love about them is that they weren't designed to be collected. A lot of the stamps since, I mean, even later Victorian stamps were designed to be collected, and these were the first stamps. They were designed to be used and nothing more. And that's what makes them so interesting. Piecing it together years later. So in terms of plating it, this is my setup, and that's where I'm sitting here right now at this desk. And I'm quite lucky to have my wife's quite tolerant of me having quite a good setup. So I've got oh, skip forward, sorry, go back. So I've got the three monitors, which is really helpful. A really bright overhead light, all my stock books, my tweezers, magnifying glass, all of that. Stanley Gibbons catalogue there, which I have to hand at all times. So you can see on the screens, I scan the stamp in, have it on one screen. In the middle is a set of all stamps of a particular set of corner letters, which is where we compare them to, which is one of the steps of the process, which I'll talk through. On the left screen, you can just about see the GBPS website, which I refer to all the time. That's probably the most indispensable resource is the GBPS website. So that's my setup. So there you go. So I'm going to talk now a bit about plating and how what method I use, and then give you an example, and then give you some more tips on it. So this is the broad process that I use to plate a penny red. So first of all, I'd look at the cancellation because the Maltese cross was only used up until 1844. So that gives you a plate range for starters. Secondly, I'd look at the alphabet of the corner letters. So plates up to 131 use alphabet 1, and plates 132 to 177 used alphabet 2. So that's extremely helpful. There were plates used beyond that, but they were printed only in perforated form. So if you've got an imperforate penny red, it can't be above 177. And then I make detailed observations of the stamp, which will be useful when it comes to the final stage, which is the visual comparison. And step four is the measurement. Some people simply do the measurement alone. Some people do it as part of the process, and some people don't do it at all. But I'm going to talk it through with you because it is a very useful part of the process to narrow down the plate range more. There was a time back in like the 70s and 80s where people didn't have access to comparison stamps, so they could only use the measurement method. And if you look back at like plate reconstructions from the 1970s, there are lots of errors because people could only use the measurements, and it's not a reliable method on its own, but it is useful as part of the wider method. Then the final step is a visual confirmation. That's where you're trying to get to, but to narrow down what you're checking. Because you could simply take your stamp and compare it to all 177 options and pick which one it is, but that would take you quite a long time. So what we do is try and narrow it down first. So I'm going to talk you through how to narrow down which plate it might be. So to summarize that, step one, review the cancellation. Maltese cross examples are usually plates 42 or below. There was a crossover period where both cancellations were used. So anything like in the 30s and 40s could be either, but ultimately, if it's a Maltese cross, it's likely to be plate 42 upwards. If it's an 1844 type cancellation, it's likely to be plates 37 and above, and usually higher than that again. Occasionally, you'll see an 1844 type used on an early plate, but that would have involved somebody basically keeping the stamp in a drawer for a year or two and using it later, which did happen occasionally, but you'll rarely see one used on anything below plate 33, for example. So that's the first step, which is helpful. So some people just start collecting Maltese cross cancellations, for example, because that gives them a much narrower plate range to work on, and then eventually expands to the other ones later. That's how I started. Started on Maltese crosses and expanded. And then step two, as I say, is the alphabet. And I could talk about this for an hour, but I'll try to keep this a bit brief. But basically, there's two alphabets, and alphabet two is generally bigger, is probably the upshot. And some letters are quite hard to distinguish. I struggle myself with some still, like H's and G's are quite difficult. But if you've got a letter B, the letter B is much bigger on alphabet two. And once you've looked at thousands of them, it will jump out. So if you've got an alphabet one stamp, it will be from plates 131 or below. If you've got an alphabet B stamp, it will be from plates 132 and above. So that's one of the factors to help you narrow it down. And then this is a really important step. And the more you do this, the more you'll know what to look out for. The reason that this is important is because quite often you'll spot you'll make an observation which will direct you to just one stamp. So it may well be that you, for example, spot at the bottom of the stamp there's this small missing patch of ink next to the O. It's called the O flaw, and it's a famous flaw on the early penny reds, which only occurred on plates 8, 9, or 10, for example. So sometimes if you spot a really blatant observation, it will point you towards a really narrow range. So basically examine the entire stamp. Particularly look for flaws in the frame because they're extremely helpful. If there's a weakness around the one penny or a weakness at the top or blurs in the corners, they can be extremely distinctive. So most of these do simply recur throughout on that position on that plate. They're constant marks. So yeah, a thorough examination of the stamp is a really important step. And then the measuring method. So I personally don't do this, but it is a really important step. The reason I don't do it is because although it might sound crazy, I do it by eye. So I can actually look at the corner letters now and judge the measurements just sheerly by eye. So I can estimate that a particular letter might measure 2 and 3, for example, and usually that's be pretty much there. But there is a tool that you can buy from GBPS to specifically measure exactly the position of the letters, and that included with the other observations usually really helps you to narrow down which stamp it could be. Particularly if you have a stamp where one of the letters is quite misplaced, that will usually only give you a small range of possible places. So I will cover this in my example that I go through today. And then the final step is to make the comparison. So the best resources I've found for this are the GBPS website, as I say, invaluable. And also, Martin Jenkinson of Sterlinster Stamps sells plating CDs where you can see every single example of a particular stamp. So I use that every day. So here we can see for the stamp OF, he's laid out every single example, like plate 12, 13, 14, 15, all the way up. So you can simply check off, go through all the stamps and look at which one matches. Problem is, as I say, that would take a long time unless you narrow it down. But it's one of the tools that we use as the final step. So the first 4 steps are to get you to a point where you're doing the comparison, but only on a small number of stamps. Okay. So I've just summarized the 5 steps there when you have the slides after so you can see what they are. So what I'm going to do now is try and do an example, see if this works. So I've picked a deliberately completely unremarkable stamp, which has no special features really. I picked this completely randomly to see if it would work, and I've worked it through, and I think it worked quite well. So here's the stamp. Nobody would know what plate it is. As I say, there's no plate number on it. There's no features that would jump out. So all we know at this point is it's anything from plate 1B all the way up to plate 177. We don't know any more than that at this point. So the first step, as I said, was to look at the cancellation. So this stamp has not a Maltese cross. It has an 1844 type cancellation, which means that it's highly likely to be from plates 37 or higher. It's not guaranteed, and nothing in this is guaranteed. And many times I've gone through this whole process only to find that I haven't got an answer and I've got to start again. And only this week I was plating a stamp which had a Maltese cross, and I couldn't plate it for half an hour, and eventually found out that it was a late use of the Maltese cross, and it was actually a plate 67, which had a Maltese cross, which is extremely unusual. I've only seen a handful of those, in my entire life. But you can sometimes you feel like you're going insane with this and have to start again. But most of the time, an 1844 cancellation will mean plates 37 or above. So that's step one. So we've narrowed it down a bit. That's good. So step two is the alphabet. So this stamp. So as I mentioned, I think H's are one of the harder letters to differentiate, but C's are quite easy to see because the alphabet 2C is a lot bigger than the alphabet 1C. So this one has a C, and it jumps out to me now, and it will take practice, but I can tell you that that is an alphabet 1C. It's much too small to be an alphabet 2C. And I'm confident to say that is alphabet 1. So that helps us again. So that means we've narrowed it down further. So it can't be above 131. So the range we're working with now it's highly likely to be somewhere between 37 and 131. So step three is to make observations. Um, so some observations that is when you first start this, you don't know what you're looking for, but the more you do, the more you start to realize things that are important. So things that I noticed on this particular stamp were looking really closely at the corner letters. There is a small blur of ink above the H. And you don't always know for sure whether that's just a one-off on the stamp, but blurs on stamps in the corner letters are usually constant. So there is definitely a clear blur above the H, which might be helpful later. Don't know for sure, but it might be helpful. Um, and I do think there's a slight blur just below the C, although that's a lot fainter, a bit less sure on that, but I think there's a blur there. And I'm going to give you another tip now, which I've only really come to realize in the last few weeks because somebody mentioned this to me. I was stuck on a stamp, and somebody pointed out that looking at the top frame lines, these are quite weak frame lines, and any stamp that has strong frame lines at the top can only be from plates 88 and above. And I looked into this further, and I think it is true. So after plate 88, for some reason, the people producing the plates recut all of the corners to make them much bolder. And when you see like a plate 88 or above, you'll see what I mean. But these corners are much weaker than the later plates. So based on that, I am certain that this cannot be above plate 87 because all higher plates had the bold corners. So the top corners are not recut. So that is another helpful feature, which I'm going to factor into my guidance going forward. And then the other tip which I always give is look at the frames all the way around. Look to see whether there's any weak or strong frames, particularly above postage and below 1 penny. This one doesn't have any frame weaknesses, but I'm still going to note that because sometimes they do. It might help us later on. So apart from that, it's still quite unremarkable. But yeah, hopefully some notes there that will help us later on. So we will now go to the corner letter measurements. So I tried to draw this as a diagram, so I think it kind of works. You use the GBPS tool to measure how far away the letters are from the sides of the stamp. And the tool takes a bit of practice. It's basically a transparent overlay that you put over the stamp and slide it along until this line touches the letter. And then you can read off the number next to it. And that gives you the measurement of how far the letter is from the corner. So measurement A on this stamp is 6. So the H is 6, I think it's millimeters, away from the side. It's 3 from the bottom. So measurement B is 3. And then you measure the C. So measurement C is 3, and measurement D is about 7. And like I say, if I were to look at this myself, I would see that that C is quite a long way away, and that would feel like it's about 7 to me. But that's only after years of practice. But that's how you measure the corner letters. So we've got 6, 3, 3, 7. That's our measurement for this stamp. So what I then do is type that into this incredibly useful GBPS plating tool, which then gives you some options. So it also lets you say whether it's 6 and a bit or just under 3 by putting a plus or a minus. So it gives you like a little bit of scope to do that. So I type the letters in, and then what it would do is give you a batch of options which match that closely. Now, it's extremely hard to measure those letters perfectly. So give or take 2 is probably a good bet. So the, looking at the range of stamps it's returned, give or take 2, the tool is saying it could be 70, 66, 67, 103, 110, 144, 177, 164, 138. Now, we have already decided it can only be somewhere between 37 and 87. So looking at that range there, the only options left are 70, 66, and 67. So the measurement really helped us here. It narrowed it down a lot. So it could well be that this all goes wrong and it doesn't work, and we could have to start again. But our best guess at the moment is it's probably one of those 3 plates. So the next step is to look at those 3 examples and see if it matches any visually. So let's do that. So here I've simplified it by just including the top and bottom of the stamp because those are the main features which are different. So at the top left, I've put our example, and then I've put the 66, 67, and 70, and we're going to have a look at these and see what we think, see if any match. So I'll start with 67. So you're looking at 67, although the image is quite blurry because the resources are low res annoyingly, we can scan it as high res as we want, but the images that have been stored are blurry, but we can still work with that. So we can see here the top frame has actually got a weak frame above the O, which is really distinctive. So plate 67 has the weak frame. And actually looking at the letters, I would say that the C doesn't look quite right to me. I think the C is slightly rotated clockwise compared to our version and is slightly tucked down to the left. So I don't like 67. I don't think it's 67. So we've got 66 and 70. So looking at 70, there's some indicators here that look really good to me. So there's actually a blur of ink above the H. So again, although it's low res image, I think that looks like it matches quite closely to the blur that we've got on our stamp. Looking at the C, I would say there's a blur below the C as well. And I do think the corner letters look really good to me. They look like they match. 66 is close as well. And it takes a bit of practice and a bit of judgment, but I don't think it's 66. I like the blurs on 70. I think the letters match, and I feel like it is 70. So I'm going to have a look at the 2 stamps side by side. This is our stamp. This is the plate 70. Seeing it all in one go, I feel like this, although, like I say, it's hard to know for sure because the images are blurry, but I think this is the right stamp. I think the H and C look pretty good. The blurs are in the right place. Particularly this blur here is so distinctive. The H is quite heavy, and all the frames look good. I'm confident this is a plate 70. So I would, at this point, probably do some more checks, probably go back and forth a bit. And I have done that, and I can tell you it is a plate 70. So we've got an identification there. So I'm now going to give you some more tips on things to look at to help you narrow down the ranges more. So the kind of things you're looking at when on the stamp that we saw the little blurs in the corners, and we saw the strong frame lines, and we saw the weak corners. So the kind of things you want to look for are things like I'll go through them all in the next few slides. So recut corners is a good one, which I've mentioned, and then corner frame extensions. So quite a lot of, particularly the later plates, have got what we call corner frame extensions, where a line extends from the corner of the stamp, which is extremely distinctive. When you see one of those, definitely note it. because that will help you hugely later, and it may well direct you just to a handful of stamps. If you see a strong extension, you can probably look up the stamps with extensions. You might just have 5 or 10 of those. That's always helpful. Um, Frame lines are really useful. So looking at the top right corner square, for example, um, there's a few distinctive broken frames that occur quite consistently. So plate 12 will almost always have this small break in the frame here. Plate 13 has a full break pretty much. Plate 14 has like a weak line in the top. Then there's other kind of frame flaws, including what we call a P flaw. So there's a few plates that have like a little gap above the P, which can be extremely distinctive and helpful. There's a few plates that have really strong frame lines. So particularly plate 76 and plate 90, for some reason, whoever put the plates together fully recut all of the left and right frames. So there's a really strong, bold line down the left and right. So when you see a stamp with really strong frame lines, it might well be a 76 or a 90. Other clues that help are just the distinctiveness of the letters. So some stamps have what we call a blind corner letters, where where they were punched in so hard that they filled in the little white areas in the letters. Some have really distinctive letters. So plate 12 has a broad E, for example. Plate it also has a short H. And then there's the J. So J itself is a plating step because there's two types of J. There's the square J and the round J, and square J's specifically occur on this range of plates, and round J's occur on this range of plates. So if you have a stamp with a J, you've got an immediate step to narrow things down there. So when the workers punched the corner letters in, they would sometimes slip or put it in the wrong place and have to burnish it out and redo it. So we see examples of double letters where there's like a ghost image of a letter with a strong letter over the top, and they can be really strong indicators of a particular plate. So try and spot those. There was one plate, plate 21, where embarrassingly the worker stamped the wrong letter all the way down a particular column and had to burnish it out and replace it. So there's actually a corrected letter on plate 21. And then there's a particularly quirky variety where for some reason they didn't have an R punch, so they just punched in a P and then manually carved in the tail of the R. So it looks a mess. So when you see the blurry R, you know that it's one of these particular varieties, and there's only a small number of plates that have the P converted to R, so you can narrow that down immediately if you've got one of these R's. There's all manner of things that will help. So there's guidelines which were put onto the plate to help them position the transfer rollers. And if they happen to go through a value, then they couldn't burnish that off afterwards. So it simply stayed as part of the stamp. But those are quite distinctive. So they could be through the value, through a corner letter, or through a letter. And then there were these pin lines. So these occurred between the TF and the TG stamps on later printings. So if you've got a pin line, then that will help you as well. And there's so many small constant marks and varieties on stamps. So when you're examining your stamp, if you see one of these, you'll probably be able to narrow it down quite quickly. So this stamp has like a scratch in the corner letter. This one has a scratch in the top corner. Some have blobs in the value. All manner of consonant varieties that you want to try and spot if you can. I'm going to specifically mention re-entries because these are so interesting. If you have a re-entry, they are definitely more valuable because people like to collect these. So re-entry, or technically a fresh entry, occurred when the worker pressed the transfer roller into the plate, but maybe mispositioned it or did it wrong and had to burnish it out and lay it down again. What that often leaves is a bit like when you punched in a double corner letter. It leaves a ghost image behind it, where you see basically the sections of the stamp doubled sometimes, and some of those are quite distinctive and really quite interesting. So if you spot that, you've basically got what's called a fresh entry or a re-entry, depending on which book you're reading. And then just some other quirky things with the stamps. So beyond plating, this is other details, but some people like to collect shades. So although they were printed in red, that ranges anything from dark, deep red through to orangey red and all manner of shades in between. Some people like to collect cancellations. They were supposed to be cancelled in black, but sometimes they were cancelled in other colours, for example. And then with the Maltese crosses, some towns and cities had their own made, um, and they looked quite different to the official issued one. So some people like to collect special Maltese crosses. And just some other final bits, really. So in the book, I cover grading and valuation. So one of my real bugbears is seeing dealers overcharging for stamps. So I wanted to give people like some real clear guidance on how to assess how much a stamp should be sold for. So taking into account the condition of the stamp and the plate and any varieties, exactly what you should pay for that stamp. Which is what I use to price my stamps broadly, and would help you with buying and selling stamps. So I really want to help people to feel confident with building their collections and buying and selling with actual proper prices. Um, so yeah, that's it. So just some final references there, and I want to just say thank you again to Rob and Joan for letting me talk about this. And I would go on and on if I was allowed, but thank you for giving me the chance to talk about it. And thank you very much. And I'm very happy to speak to anybody who wants to ask questions or just talk about it. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Daniel. That was very, very good. Those are the salient points for
Yeah,
plating a penny red. Um,
there you go.
Michael Clark asks, have some of the letter punches survived to this day so that they can help us with identification?
I don't think any have survived. No, I've looked into letter punches and the Maltese cross obliterators too, and I think very few of. So the reason that none of them survived, I think, is because I think they had to be destroyed at the time because effectively all of the items used for printing were it was a secure printing process. So if anybody got hold of any of this, they could have made their own stamps, if they had enough of the equipment. So I think they had to all be destroyed. So I don't think any survived, unless anybody knows
Mhm.
more than me. I don't think they did, no.
Mark Boyce has a question. He wants to know if we could see the next to the last slide one more time.
Um, was it that one?
I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm actually not sure what his question was about that page.
Okay.
People are starting to ask questions. He's got a few dozen penny reds, but some appear to be on blue paper. What
Hmm.
would that say to you?
Yeah. So the penny black was printed on white paper, and the penny red was printed on white paper too, but using different ink. So the ink that was used for the penny red had something added to it called I always forget what it's called. It's called like prussiate of potash or something like that, which effectively reacted with the paper when it was wet and stained the paper blue. And it was added to the ink to make the ink more fugitive, so that it made it harder to wash off the cancellation without washing off the stamp ink too. But it caused bluing to the paper, which was considered actually to be really problematic at the time. And Perkins couldn't solve this for like over a decade until eventually they solved it by accident later on after they had a fire at their premises where they had to make new ink, and then they found a way to avoid the bluing. But ultimately, for many years, it was caused by the ink that they used to print the stamps, staining the paper.
Yeah, there's an interesting side feature to that too. When you have what they call an ivory head, and
Exactly.
it's the same reasoning behind what you're describing there is to where the spaces are on the plate and where the ink is touching. So if you turn the stamp over, you can see Victoria's head in silhouette.
So the ivory head actually proves that the paper itself wasn't blue. So
Yeah.
the white part on the back occurs where the ink was less present, such as the portrait, and the background had more ink. So yeah, that shows it was the ink that stained the paper rather than the actual paper being blue itself.
Ed Wally mentions to us that the Royal Philatelic Society holds a few of the letter punches in their museum.
Wow, there we go. Thank you. That's fascinating. Yeah,
And the Royal Philatelic Society of London have a number of the later punches at their disposal as well. But I know they're few and far between. I know that.
yeah. No, thank you for that information. That is brilliant. Yeah.
Okay, let's see. Do we have anybody with their hands up yet? Do you have any questions?
I'm still bringing people over, but someone asked about plate 77.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So it's an interesting question. So people talk about plate 77. It's actually a completely different stamp they're thinking of. So a plate 77 imperfect penny red is not rare at all. It's a completely normal stamp. Plate 77 was not rare. What you're thinking of is the later die 2 perforated penny plate, which plate 77 is extremely rare, where only one sheet survived and wasn't supposed to have done. But no, plate 77 imperfect penny red die 1 is completely normal. Nothing special about 77 at all.
Oh, you just burst my bubble.
There we go.
Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got some 77s, so
Yeah.
yeah, I guess it falls into my my affordability.
Yeah. Completely normal.
Okay, here we go. Where can we purchase your book?
Oh, well, thank you for asking. My book is on my website, danielmatthewsstamps.co.uk. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a great book, let me tell you.
Oh, thank you, Rob. Yeah, I'm glad I wrote it because I mulled it over for some time. Because I kept having people ask me about stamps, and I was also really concerned about the hobby dying off. And I thought I'm in a position where I can actually help to demystify it, keep the hobby going, and explain things to people. And it's been embraced huge. Like I can't even I never expected it to be so popular. It's just been a revelation. But yeah, thank you for your kind words, Rob. Yeah.
You know, another question I think some people have is what are the references? What are we comparing to? And I think the answer to that is the imprimatur sheets.
Mm. So yeah, it's a good question, and I often forget to go right back to the basics on that. So you might think it's impossible to have a source stamp because how will you know what a plate 50 even should look like? The reason we know is because when the stamps were printed, plate 50, for example, a sheet was kept safe and saved. It was called an imprimatur sheet, as Rob said, or a registration sheet, and those still exist. And they're almost complete. So there's a few missing from them, which have been filled in later by collectors. But we're comparing it to an initial registration sheet, which we know is that plate. And without those, we would be lost. But fortunately, yeah, one of each plate was kept.
Yeah, I know that on some of those sheets, the bottom couple lines were trimmed off of some of them, and
Yeah,
which leaves a question, as far as reference goes on occasion, but there aren't many of those.
and I think they were given to like important people, weren't they? Like the royal
Right.
family. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't
I,
know if I'm unmuted or not. Can you hear me?
Yes.
yes.
Yeah, I've got a question, really. I mean, oftentimes you see complete sheets being offered for sale, but given the presentation you've just given, it would seem that the chances of a sheet being actually a sheet
Mm,
complete has
mm.
been pretty strange and not strange, but very rare, I would think. Is it not?
I am not aware of any complete sheets, other than possibly I've got a feeling there might be a complete plate 10 sheet somewhere. Um, but I think there are almost no complete sheets. No, you would never see a complete sheet for sale. It would be priceless if there was. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, I've never read anything about a complete sheet being available.
Yeah.
Yeah, the cost would be enormous.
Yeah.
Well, definitely after this presentation, I would think it's nigh on impossible.
There might be complete sheets later, perforated penny reds. There may be, but not the imperforates. Not.
Yeah,
Chris
absolutely
Savage,
fascinating.
Chris
Sorry.
Savage has his hand up.
No,
Uh,
I've
it's
brought
you.
it down now.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, thank
I
you. I've
tried
just
to
had a
bring you over, but and I'm allowing everyone. I finished bringing everybody over once. If I missed you, please raise your hand, and I will bring you over. And okay, I missed a lot of people. Wow.
Okay, I've got one other very quick question, if I may be able to jump in there, and that is for somebody who wants to start out collecting these and plating and so on. It would seem that it's a pretty insurmountable challenge to get going. What would your recommendations be for somebody who's just getting underway? How would you start?
Well, so the way I started was I started with the early the Maltese crosses because that narrows it down quite dramatically already to just the first 40 odd plates.
Yeah,
And but even that was hard to start with. In terms of plating, actually, my recommendation is to try and plate a multiple, like a block or a pair, because if you plate one and do your best with it, and then you look at the stamps around it and try and plate those, you'll have a complete separate reference where you'll know whether you've got it right or wrong. So if you think it's a plate 20 and then you look at the stamp next to it and that's not a plate 20, you've got a little bit of feedback straight away there. So I suggest starting with blocks. Like a block of 4 would be amazing if you can get a tatty block of 4 to practice on.
yeah. What about the scroll down the side? Aren't there some of these Victoria stamps that actually have a date that's actually scrolled into the side? Would
A
that be
date.
applicable for the penny reds?
Um, so some
No,
later,
not a,
yeah, no, some later penny reds had the plate number written into the side,
Right.
but there's no date written into them. No.
Or maybe it's just the plate number then. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what you're thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking of. Yeah.
Warren Trimble asks if there's a comprehensive reference of the distinguishing marks like guidelines, burnishings, etc., like that. And I would say, I mean, certainly your book is a reference for a part of that. And another one that I think most of us that do this are familiar with is the Stanley Gibbons Queen Victoria Volume 1, Part 1, which
Yeah.
is more or less out of print at this moment, but I believe that Stanley Gibbons is putting that available online.
Yes. So
So
my tips there are that um, the only comprehensive reference in print is Statham. So and I've got his books in a box, and they cost me £1,000 because I've got like a perfect copy of them, and they are extremely rare. And you can't get them, but he has written an enormous volume with a comprehensive list of the consonant varieties. However, it's not that useful because ultimately the GBPS website has that too. So you can simply log on to there, and when you've got your corner letters, you can type those in and go through the list, and for those corner letters, it will cover every single plate and describe the varieties for that stamp. So I suggest that above any books.
Maurice Buxton says that GBPS plastic comparator was included in the Fisher Brown books.
Yeah.
However, the plating tool on the website is a PDF, so you can print one out on acetate if you want.
Oh, does it? Okay. Yeah, I didn't know that. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I just guessed the measurements now. So
Daniel, do you do any expertising of penny reds?
I do. Yeah. And that's so that is available on my website too. So yes, I do. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. Do you have any other questions out in the audience at this moment?
The other possibility for a plastic gauge is to find someone who's got 2 or 3 volumes of the book and may therefore be persuaded to part with 1 or 2 gauges.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Duncan.
What about the Python books being put on a website with a memory, and then you just type in one thing and it comes to all the various stamps.
That would be amazing.
Hmm.
My understanding is that they're copyrighted, and it would need to be done by. So I think Eric Paul might be the publisher. I'm not sure, but ultimately
I
that'd
bet
be
so.
him, and I don't think he's particularly up for that. But that would be amazing. Yeah.
Does the number that is canceled on a penny red represent a particular city?
Yes, it does. So there are a number of different possibilities there. So London had its own batch of numbers, and then the provincial towns had their own batch too. So depending on the exact style, it's either London or provincial. And yes, each town had a unique number, and that list is available again on the GBBS website, which I use. Some of them are rare, which you can look up the rarity, and you can look up your own. So some people collect stamps from their own city, for example.
Yes.
Hmm.
Good.
Louis has his hand up. You might not see him, Rob. And anyone who would like to ask a question who didn't come over,
Can you
have the
hear me?
ability to talk.
Can you hear me, Peter Lister?
Yeah.
Oh, in answer to one of the people that asked you the question about how shall I start,
Mm.
I would suggest to them that they start by collecting C8s or C10s, which obviously are a lot cheaper, and there's a lot less plates for them to actually go through. You're down to about, I think it's about, they start at about 23 and go up to 68 with the. Then, of course, you've got the alphabet fours there as well with 50 and 51. But that was, I would say, would be the best way to start to learn plating.
Yes, thank you for that. And just to clarify a point there, so the C8s and C10s are perforated penny reds from die two. So they're from like a separate range, but still absolutely beautiful and part of the same kind of history. So I haven't covered those today, but they are. I might cover those maybe in future. But yeah, they are the next batch of
Well,
penny
I
reds.
started on that and done about
Yes.
70,000 of them over
Wow.
about 10
Amazing.
years.
That is amazing. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Louis, did you have a question?
Actually, Rob, I have several. This
Ah,
this is a new area for me. I'm not familiar with much of it. I'll start by asking about the plates. I couldn't keep track, but how many plates were actually used, and was it because of a reason other than wear on the metal that they had to use so many?
That's a great question. So the plates used were from 1B up to 177 for the imperforates, apart from a few which weren't used. Some of the black ones weren't used. So I think three or four were missing from there. But yes, the reason that they were replaced was plate wear. So they were used to print anything from like 50 to 130,000 sheets. And towards the end of that, the plates would wear. So although the plates were hardened, they were hardened still. They did still wear after 100,000 prints. At which point they were, the design started to become, clearly worn, and then the next plate was brought in, and the plate use was overlapped as well to an extent. But yeah, plate wear was the main reason.
Okay. I think you partially answered a question I had written down when you showed a reference stamp. I think the answer is that there is a sheet of 240 stamps for virtually each and every plate that was used. That's
Yeah.
what that's used as a reference.
Yes. Yeah.
Into the next question about color. Um,
Mm.
you showed two side by side, and to me, they looked like very, very different shades of red.
Yeah.
How can we account for oxidation that would have occurred over the centuries and,
Mhm.
and other chemical reactions, perhaps?
Yeah.
And well, we can get into the ink. I have a great interest in ink used in the 19th.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
What about the composition of the ink? We
Yes.
we could talk about quality control, but what
Mm.
about the the consistent supply of the chemicals they use to make the ink? What can you say about that that has an effect on the color?
That's an amazing question.
Louis, there is going to be a webinar with Richard Judge, another one on color and spectrometry.
Yes,
Using,
good.
Yeah.
so that is going to go into a deep dive there. So I hope you join us for that.
I hope to be available.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Sorry, Dan.
so I've been reading about ink a lot the last month because I'm writing I'm trying to write some more books, and I've been delving into ink, and it's fascinating. And I think so. First of all, the first part of your question was in terms of the environmental factors over the centuries, and the fact is that yes, the ink would have changed over the centuries. We can't be certain that it's not being affected by oxidation. Yes, and also left, it could be left in the sunlight, or mold, or there's all manner of things that could change the ink color. So we don't know for sure, but we are pretty sure that the ink was different at the time between different stamps. Because when you look at if when I put all of my plate 50s together and compare them to my plate 100s, there is actually a different ink tone between the two. So there's batches of plates that have much richer red ink. There's batches of plates that have more often orangey. And I think I'm confident enough to say that that was ink variation. And ultimately, back then, quality control probably wasn't very strong. So with the penny black, for example, we haven't really got any kind of record of what was used for the ink. With the penny red, there are records of what was used, but almost certainly variable. And then ultimately, when it got past 1855 and they changed the ink, just by sheer chance, they made some changes. But yeah, I think there was lots of random poor quality control, and just variation over the months and years and decades of what they could source.
Okay. Another question is, what is a recut corner?
So when the stamps were laid onto the plate from the transfer roller, there were sometimes the image was laid down slightly badly, and maybe the corner was considered not to be clear enough, and they would manually chisel the corner effectively into the plate, often slightly wonky, and often very visibly. Sometimes so well that you wouldn't notice it. So yeah, a recut corner is either a really well done or a really badly done direct amendment to the plate.
Right, thank you.
Okay. David Mordaunt, you have your hand up.
What about using dates on cover?
That is extremely helpful. A stamp on cover is actually easier to plate than one off cover, because you will know for sure that it can't be below a certain plate range, because the stamp wouldn't have existed before that date. So yes, that gives you one big tip there. Yeah.
Chris Savage, you have your hand up.
Well, yes, I just mumbling around here myself in my own thoughts, but listening to the conversation on ink, but presumably paper also had a major impact on what might have been the ultimate color of the stamp, because obviously different chemicals are used in paper making. There are different types of paper made, laid paper, and so on. Would that have had some impact perhaps on the final quality of the stamp?
I think it would, and I haven't particularly explored that. I think that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the preparation before the printing, before actually ink touches the paper, can also affect it, because they would wet the paper, and how wet or how dry it was also influenced, the shading.
There we go. It's a topic to be studied in its entirety then. There you go.
Thing is, like, every aspect of this is like a research project waiting to be done, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
The more you talk about it, the more interesting it becomes and more deeper it becomes. Yeah.
Paul Sargent.
Yeah, hi Daniel. It's Paul
Hello, Paul.
Sargent in Toronto. Big fan
Nice
of
to
your
meet you.
book
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
your eBay store.
Yeah.
I didn't catch whether you mentioned a source for the sorted registration images, which are almost essential for doing this. And I
Yes.
remember when I started getting into this, I had to scramble around. Nobody really advertises.
No,
Do you have a recommended?
I access them through the GBPS website. So they hold them there.
The sorted images?
Oh, sorted. Oh, sorry, sorted images. No, okay, I see what you mean. So I access
Yeah.
those from. So Martin Jenkinson of Sturminster Stamps has sells sorted images, and I have bought all of his packages and used those. So
Yeah.
I think
That's where I got mine too. So I'm going to
uh,
post a link to that on the chat. I just wanted to make sure you weren't
yeah, yeah.
selling them yourself, perhaps.
I will do one day. Yes, yeah,
So
working
now,
on it.
what exactly are those for those of us who are not familiar with that?
When you are when you're comparing your stamp against different versions of that position, it's really helpful to see all of the plates side by side by corner letter. So if you have like a GH, you want to see all of the GHs together, as opposed to looking at the plates, because then you have to go through all the plates separately. So you want to see them all in one go, and hopefully, Martin has put together that list. So you can skim through them all very quickly.
Good God.
Must
So
have
that
taken him.
source would be helpful, Paul.
Yeah, I'm
It
just
sounds
looking
like.
for it now.
It's so Sturminster Stamps is the
Yeah.
website. Yeah.
Okay, Jennifer DeLumba, you have a question? Or no, or is it Edmund
I
Truell?
think it's Edmund.
Yes,
Muted.
I don't know how this. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, super. So one of the things that I and my late father George did was to look at all the plating, all the positions on a plate by color of paper. Now I know the color of paper is effectively an error in the sense that you've got deep blues and pale blues and so on. Do you look at that in your, this of course means you can now collect another 40,000 in case you were feeling a bit upset, if not 120,000. But what we try to do is actually look at deep blue, medium blue, pale blue as well, in terms of recreating a dark blue plate or a pale blue plate. Does that make any sense?
That sounds wonderful. Yeah. And I think just to add to that, I've found that particular plates are much more likely to be dark blue.
Exactly, yeah. So that some of those, what I've found is quite interesting. Have you found, it sounds like you have, a consistency or an inconsistency in that some of those plates seem to, as you say, create much more blueness, if there is such a word,
Yeah.
than the other ones.
Yeah, and it would kind of make sense that at a particular point in time that maybe they used really, really excessively damp paper, which and maybe for like a year or so and then they stopped doing that. So it makes sense that there were batches of time where that happened. But I was plating a batch the other day, and loads of them were dark blue, and they were all plate 36. And I started to kind of think like maybe at some point in time, when they were working on that plate, they kept the paper wet or something. Yeah.
Or was it particularly damp London weather?
I've been a rainy month, yeah.
Okay, does anybody else have a question? I'm not seeing any of their hands.
I think Louis' hand is up again.
It is, yes.
Louis.
Yes, Daniel, I'd like to follow up on the conversation you had with Paul about sorted stamp or images. I may have misunderstood. I thought that all the GH, the example you used, the GH stamps would all come from the same sheet on the same plate.
No. So what I'm saying is, if you have a stamp which has GH just randomly, then it could be from any plate. And rather than look through all of the imprimatur sheets separately, ideally you would simply want to see all of the GHs ordered by plate. so you can skim through them. But no, each plate had every position from AA to TL on, of which GH was just one. Yeah.
Okay, I didn't understand that.
Sorry.
So, another, perhaps final, somewhat trivial question. How does one acquire 30,000 examples of the same stamp?
Yeah, I know. Because it is kind of the same stamp, isn't it? Because it's SG8 in the catalogue, but to me, every single one is different. Plate and corner letter but yeah, it is. It sounds insane, doesn't it? And it's more than that now, to be honest. It's probably heading towards 50 now. So yeah.
But beyond that, how many dealers, how many sources did you have to go through over so many years to acquire tens of thousands of the same stamp? I don't know how many were printed back in the 1840s.
So I think in terms of printed, I've got the number 34 billion in my head. Somebody might be able to correct me on that, but billions were printed. Billions, yeah.
What, 21 billion, Daniel, from
Oh,
1840 to 1879.
Thank you.
I
you.
did the math last week.
Yeah, many billions. So I have an insignificant proportion of those. But yeah, still, you can see on my shelf, I've got the stock books there. I can point to them there. There are 6 or 7 books of them. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Louis. Doug Maddox.
So, given the vast numbers of different stamps there are here, how do you establish a value for each one?
Well, yes, and the brilliant question. Ultimately, the value of a stamp is unique to that stamp, and so I've gone quite far with trying to break that down and establish that. Ultimately, you can't give a value to any stamp because you're right, it is unique. I've given broad, so Stanley Gibbons give very broad pricing, also unrealistic pricing, but very broad. So I've tried to go into much more detail by plate number, any varieties, and condition. But beyond that, there's many factors again. So I've tried my best with it, but ultimately each stamp is unique and depends on what somebody will sell it for and buy it for. Yeah, so yeah, very good question.
All set, Doug?
I don't know any more than I did, other than I have so many of these, and essentially they're worthless until you know they're something.
I think the starting point is to look up the plate or to get the plating and to grade it by condition and to check for any varieties. And I've priced it by that's how I've priced it. So that will give you a starting point. If there's something quirky about it, then it might be more valuable. But I think what I would say is the pricing I've given is probably a starting point, and then any quirks would add to it if there's something special about it, like a rare town cancellation or something like that. But I think the pricing in my catalog, in my catalog section, probably helps. Yeah.
Yeah, that and maybe adding to it the number of copies that were printed, the number of sheets printed for a given plate.
Yeah.
Some of them there were fewer than others for sure.
Yeah. And some are more collectible just from the virtue of the fact that some have multiple states and there's all manner of quirks when you get into it.
Yeah.
So rarity is part of it, but
Patrick McDermott, you're muted.
Unmute. There we
There
go.
you go.
I'm sorry for that. I haven't been back in a year or two, but yeah, this area has always fascinated me, but it's also mystified me because I've always had this feeling like there's a code of some kind that if we could just determine the code, that it would all magically appear. But there remains a randomness to the way even that the individual stamps were put on each stamp. That I just was there any thought behind this to keep plates, so that counterfeiting would be more difficult just because the plates were original and they could be compared to the stamps being printed, or is that just not even a question for this time?
Possibly, and somebody may know more than me on this. The reason they kept the registration sheet was to check for fraud. So if they did find a stamp that they suspected of fraud, they could compare it specifically to the registration sheet. So I think, yeah, it may well be that the very specific quirks of the stamp were part of the plan, possibly, but
Yeah,
yeah,
because you described them taking a plate and going down with a little tap, 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 tap.
yeah,
And I'm thinking, well, who was the person behind the engraver who's choosing that letter at that time to do, these precise engravings? Or
yeah.
is that not what we're talking about?
Yeah, yeah, and I think so. The engraving of the die was a highly skilled job, and I think the
Yeah.
laying down of the plates was probably less, moderately skilled. And I think the stamping in of the corner letters was probably less skilled again. I think they probably delegated that. Um, I don't know. I don't know how much thought was put into doing that. It feels random. It's helpful to us.
Random. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. I've enjoyed your presentation a
Well,
lot.
thanks for
So
listening. Yeah.
Brilliant.
thank
Yeah,
you.
very good.
Thanks,
Mm.
Patrick.
Sure.
Duncan.
Yes, I have some penny red poetry to share.
Oh,
Ah.
yeah. I think, Duncan, did you do a presentation a few months ago? I think I remember watching one of your presentations. I might be imagining that, but
I've done them for the GBPS for
yeah, I think I've seen
Postal
you.
History Society.
Yeah.
So
And you spoke for us, Duncan, don't you?
and yes,
Wasn't recently, but
the British Empire Study Group, GBPS, Ottawa, Burlington. So we have here a philatelist stood at the pearly gates, his head was bended low, and sadly to the man of fates he said, "Which way have I to go?" "What hast thou done?" St. Peter asked, "to crave admission here?" I've plated penny blacks and reds for many, many a year." Come in, St. Peter cried, and loudly rang the bell. Come in, you're welcome here. You've had your share of hell."
So people were plating them in 1920.
And that's from no, it's volume 28 of the GB Journal.
Wow.
So it's a 1990 edition. But
Yeah.
the question is, when was the dinner? Given it's an anecdote. No, it's blatant filler. Sorry, it's an anecdote from a respected member of the society.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, dinner of 28. Yes, right.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. Thank you.
That's funny.
I'll stop sharing.
Thank you, Duncan.
I would
Paul
say,
Davy.
Apparently, the poem was based on one that appears in the Labour network, Labour Union's set of various transport companies and some other industry in Australia.
Mhm.
Yeah, thanks. I was just going to point out that, and I don't know if it was mentioned right at the very beginning of the talk, I missed the first couple of minutes, but a number of the penny black plates were used later to print in red.
Mhm.
So you find penny red stamps printed from black plate. And when you're
Yes.
looking at the value of these stamps, those are of more interest because people like to get stamp in black from plate 10 and a matching stamp to stay in corner letters in red.
Yeah.
And as the matched pair, both have added value, as it were.
They do.
So
Yeah.
that's worth looking out for. And the other thing is there is a wiki page. I've put the link into the chat earlier on, which has a lot of higher resolution scans of a lot of these stamps.
Yes.
It's
That's
not complete because it's a wiki, so anyone can add to it, but it's worth going along to take a look. You might just find the information you need and a better quality scan of the stamp you're comparing to.
yeah. Thank you, Paul. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
And of
interesting.
course, and we get the argument that the penny black from plate 11 isn't really a black plate. It's really a red plate printed in black.
Yes.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Chris, you have your hand up. Chris Savage.
Oh, oh, sorry.
That's all right.
Yes, no, I was just again on the trivia front. King George V and VI were big stamp collectors, as indeed was Roosevelt. Are there any examples of these complete sheets, perhaps in the royal collection? I don't know if anybody's seen any of the stamps from the royal collection, but I was just curious to know if indeed, Daniel, have you any idea as to whether or not there are some gems to be seen in that collection?
So in terms of complete sheets, the only sheet that I think might exist complete is a plate 10, and somebody else might know more than me on this. I've got a feeling that some royal collection holds a complete sheet of plate 10, but I'm just trawling my memory for that, so take it with a pinch of salt. But
there's a picture of the plate 10 sheet in your book, Daniel.
That's what I'm thinking of. I think I looked at it, yeah, for that.
I
yeah,
think it was up for sale in the last couple of years, maybe.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Daniel, one of the things you referred to earlier on in your presentation was, or let me refer back to the question about what's a good place to start. And it would be probably any of the varieties that have the Maltese crosses. But then you can take that a step deeper because the Maltese crosses themselves, there were many, many unique examples of that depending on the location.
Yeah. Yeah. Like somebody said, it's one stamp, but it's the most complex and interesting field, and the more you get into it, there's infinite things you can do with it. But yeah, I think everybody will have their own way of doing it.
Mark Boyce.
It strikes me that this plating business is ripe for AI. Artificial intelligence could you could put a scan in and it would automatically do the check letter balancing and all of the variations. And someday, Daniel, you'll need to learn how to manage an AI to make this all automated.
Yeah.
Mark, I thought you were volunteering.
I'm too old. I wouldn't live long enough to get it done, I don't think.
I've been waiting and hoping for some kind of technical contribution to this, but it's so niche and complicated. The information is so hard to access that at the moment AI can't do it. It feels like surely at some point there'll be some technical solutions to it, but they're not here yet. I can't see them yet. But
and strictly speaking, it wouldn't be AI; it's image recognition.
yes, it would just be some code.
And the hard part is loading all the images. And I'll tell you, Mark, the joy in this is the detective work. It's looking at an unknown stamp and then putting in the effort, using the resources. And sometimes it's frustrating as heck. Sometimes you figure it out within a few minutes. Sometimes you can, like Daniel said, he was looking at one for half an hour and still not even. That's the joy of it. It's the process.
I agree. So the reason I became obsessed with this is because it's really hard. Literally that. Because it was one of the kind of mystical aspects of stamp collecting. I was like, well, that's what I'm going to do then. The harder, the better.
Are there any groups like how you have support groups for are there any like support groups for I was thinking of that and I'm like I don't know if I should mention that, but
Line engraved plate is anonymous.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
There's a group called the Mulready Group on the GBPS forums who have people working on plating all the time. So that's the group I go to. I don't know if anyone is a member of that here. I'm sure there are some. But yes, Paul, yeah, Paul, I know Paul, you'll be, yeah.
I'm not a member of it, but it's very active, and there's a group of about 10 of them that are very active and passing the information between.
What I've found with stamp collecting generally, and particularly this, is just how helpful people are and how kind people are. So people simply want to help other people to see the joy of collecting. There's nobody is trying to gatekeep anything. Everybody just wants to share and
Another
Everybody wants to show off, and it happens to appear as showing.
right. Well, maybe.
another tip I would put to people is if you're going to do plating, select your stamps, get all the same check letter, so that when you work on it, your eyes get set into that and you'll find it much easier. Just like you said about your plate 36, that, you know,
Yeah.
you get a group and, oh, there's another one the same, you know, it makes it speeds the system up, but you do get tuned in a lot better.
Well, that's just made me think of something actually, Peter. A good way to work on to look at some stamps where they've been plated, to look at yourself and try and satisfy yourself that you agree with the plating. That would
Yes.
be a good entry too.
Mm. Well, going back to my C10s, when I did them, I had plate 55 constructed twice with 239. And I just couldn't get that other.
Which one was missing?
Hundreds of stamps with that one check letter was missing. I just couldn't find it.
Yeah. Did you get it in the end? Or?
No.
Yeah, God.
What a number of folk do is to go after the stamps with their check letters the same as their initials. So in my case, PD.
That's
Yes.
me.
And then you can just by which point you should be able to plate it by eye if you just concentrate on the one letter combination.
Well, someone mentioned they wanted it a complete set. I've actually doing the check letters NJ, not my initials, as you can see, but I'm only missing 2 stamps out of all the impers.
That's wonderful. That's so good. Unfortunately, I can't do
25 years of work, that is.
Yeah. So my surname is one letter out, so I can't do it. So DN isn't an option.
Jennifer, you have your hand up.
Yeah, but you would be surprised. Can you hear me? Because I'm not sure if you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
You would be surprised how far AI has come, because I just started using, they gave me access, Claude gave me access to their new version Fable for free. And I was working with the Domfil, because I collect cats on stamps catalog. So there's a topical catalog by this Spanish company. And they were involved in a scandal, and they I entered it into Claude, and Claude is having good results identifying my cats on stamps. So you would be surprised, but I don't know if you would want to enter your entire book on to Claude. You would maybe try and see if you could vibe code any tools on Claude, just one small section, one step, and see what you can do. And then I have Joan, can you still hear me?
Yes, you're cutting in and out a bit,
You can
Jennifer.
not hear me anymore.
No, I could hear you, but you're cutting in and out, but we could hear you.
Oh, I don't know what happened. This is the housekeeping thing. Alan Smith just emailed me because at our last meeting at our regular place, we didn't have air conditioning. And it looks like we won't have air conditioning again in August. So that's an issue for some of the older people to come and, it's stuffy with no air conditioning. So they want to know if the Collectors Club is available for August.
Let me
I have
know
no
the
idea
date.
if that's even possible.
Great presentation.
If I'm there, I'll make it happen, Jennifer. Just email me the date. If not, I'll try to get another victim to come in. Always happy to help. We have air conditioning.
All right. Daniel, I was just noticing one of the comments made in the chat box from Marvin Karlberg. He says, I have my thoughts, but I would love to hear your musings about why someone would want to identify the plates in the first place.
Because it's hard is
Yeah,
my
right.
answer. But beyond that,
To prove the two stamps are different.
yeah.
Yeah.
Comes to mind.
Mount Everest because it's there.
Yeah. So that is it for me. Yeah.
All right. Do we have any other questions in the audience?
Well, that was fabulous. I learned more about plating. Yeah, because it always frightened me, I have to admit.
If the discussion has come to an end, I would share one comment from my exhibit Tempramanie, which is a dreadfully serious exhibit, which some of you have heard about. The title page has a penny black, a tuppenny blue, and a penny red. I should preface the remark by saying one of my other collections is Masons. So you may find that there's a bit of an overlap here. The issue of the penny red in 1841 allowed collectors of classic issues to look down their noses at collectors of modern junk, i.e. the penny reds.
Yeah, fair enough. Thank you, Duncan.
I think it's fascinating.
Yeah.
And I'm less intimidated now than I was, when, before you started, because I'm like, oh my God, this presentation is going to go right over my head. But
No, I'm glad. Yeah, and if anybody wants to talk more, I would talk all day about it. So please do.
so is anyone up for like a second topic
the
on
other
this
advice
line of graves?
The other advice, of course, is to start with the blues. There are only about 8 plates.
That's also a good piece of advice.
And with the perforation and watermark.
Yeah, that's a good call.
And saying that, there's a very good book on just plating of the tuppenny blues anyway, and it's very cheap.
And what book is that? Are you going to take, Peter?
I'll just have a look.
Okay. You can't tease anybody and say it's a great book, but I'm not going to tell you what it is.
Oh.
Right.
It's Tupper's Blue Plating Guide by Mike Jackson.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Mike Jackson's brilliant, so I'm sure the book is good.
Yeah.
Patrick. Oh, you have to unmute. There you go.
Okay.
You had asked about another presentation, and I was just thinking penny black. Is there anyone that's done this level of detailed work with the blacks? It might be something to look into for a presenter.
Oh. Well, actually, I had someone sort of volunteer.
Good.
They said they do it. They said, I'm into this. Would you be interested in doing something with penny blacks? And I was like, I didn't respond yet because I just got the email today. But
well, I just remember, I think all stamp collectors start as children. I just believe that.
Yeah.
And my first experience with the blacks and the reds was when I was 12 years old. We used to buy from H.E. Harris out of Boston, I think. And I bought a little glassine. My parents were furious with me because it came to a resounding $15 United States money. And they said, no, what are you doing here? I said, well, that's my allowance. Anyway, I kept it in the glass and never saw another one. Of course, you don't see them in circulation until I think I took it in when I was in my 30s. And they said, oh yeah, these are, it was like $200 for it. And I said, well, my father would be proud of me. It was a good investment.
Yeah.
But I've kept up collecting Irish stamps because I'm from Ireland, and US stamps, of course.
Yeah.
Not so much British Empire, but that's just,
Yeah.
and the closest I've come probably to the reds and the blacks is just buying lots of them, mostly lots of the reds, and completely not understanding what I bought. So, this is very helpful. Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, I'm very happy to. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Patrick.
Yeah.
Doug Maddox.
So my last question is there an elusive rare plate among the imperfs like the number 77 in the perforateds?
The rarest would be 177. Feel free to chip in, people, if you have other suggestions. So that's because that was printed in perforated mostly. I think that's probably it's not rare, but it's very scarce. Would anyone be able to beat that? I think 177 is probably the scarcest.
Yeah, leaving aside varieties like the B blank A and so on, just regular
Yes.
plate. Yeah, I think 177 is
All right. Paul Sargent.
Yeah, I'll just share my screen quickly. I found this article from the London Philatelist, which talks about, whoops, I've shared the wrong.
Oh, yeah.
Oh no, there we are. It shows the box of letter punches they found at RPSL.
Wow.
And
Wow.
they hadn't been cataloged, so they were buried somewhere. And there was one guy who remembered that they'd had them donated. So the top picture there shows a punch holder, which was key to using the punches. On the left side, you can see a little square opening. So this is upside down. The punch would have gone in from underneath.
Yeah.
And there's a box of 120 or so punches. And then they did some analysis. They looked at the tips and they took images. Many of them were serifed and some were sans serif. They reckon they were from the 1870s or 1860s, I guess. And keep in mind, so these wonderful engravings, the letters are only about a millimeter high.
Yeah.
So the amount of detail they got into a hardened steel punch is quite, I mean, the layout of the plates and so on was remarkable, but the creation of these tools was quite an art in the, pre-electricity, mid-19th century.
That is
I
amazing.
just thought that's the May 2013 London Philatelist for anybody who wants to try and track that down.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. That's so good.
Okay, anything else? Or are we going to let
One of the rarest penny reds must be the royal reprint of plate 66. It was printed in black as well as in red, and was given to the let's see, Prince of Wales, and one to the Duke of Connaught. And those come up occasionally on auction. They run about $1,200 to $1,300 each.
Yeah,
Excuse me, 12 to 1,300 pounds.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, I did not know that.
not for the faint of heart? Okay. All right. Anything else? Or should we call it a night? Hearing no other comments, I guess we'll thank Daniel for a wonderful presentation.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you, Rob, and thank you, everybody, for contributing. I think it really makes it. And Daniel, we hope to have you back at some other point to go over some more about this line engraving, because like you said, you could go pretty deep into this.
I'd love to come back. Yeah, lovely to see you all, and I'm so grateful to have the chance to talk about it. And thank you for listening and talking to me about it. It's been lovely.
Yeah.